Silence changes who carries pressure in a conversation. Most people think pausing means uncertainty or weakness. In reality, the pause shifts the burden of continuation onto the other person. When you stop speaking after making a point, the interaction does not freeze. It tilts. The other person feels a rising need to fill the gap, justify themselves, or seek approval. This is done by ending your sentence cleanly and withholding any follow-up. In practice, this means you state your position and then stay still. No extra words. No explanation. The pause forces them to react to you instead of you reacting to them. This shows up when someone suddenly over-explains after you stop talking. Pauses before answering signal control, not confusion. People assume fast responses mean confidence and competence. In reality, immediate answers hand control to whoever asked the question. When you pause before responding, you force the other person to sit with uncertainty. That uncertainty increases their attention and lowers their leverage. The brain treats delayed responses as higher status because nothing urgent is being chased. This is done by letting the question land and allowing a brief silence before you speak. In practice, this means you look steady, breathe, and answer only after the pause. The content of the answer matters less than the timing of it. This shows up when someone starts adding context or rephrasing their question while waiting. They are trying to regain control you took by not rushing. Pausing after someone finishes speaking changes how their words are evaluated. Most people think listening ends when the other person stops talking. In reality, the first seconds after they finish are when meaning is negotiated. If you respond immediately, you accept their framing without friction. When you pause, you create doubt about whether what they said landed as intended. This subtle delay forces them to reevaluate their own statement. This is done by holding eye contact and not reacting right away. In practice, this means you let the silence suggest consideration rather than agreement. The other person often softens, qualifies, or corrects themselves. This shows up when they add phrases like, "What I mean is," or "maybe I should explain." The pause quietly edits their position without you saying anything. Pausing after resistance increases compliance without adding pressure. Most people try to push harder when they feel pushback. That escalates resistance because the other person feels cornered. A pause removes the sense of pursuit and changes the power dynamic. When you stop talking after resistance appears, the pressure shifts inward. The other person starts processing their own refusal instead of defending it. This is done by acknowledging the resistance briefly and then going silent. In practice, this means you do not argue or clarify in that moment. The silence creates space where their brain looks for resolution. This shows up when they restart the conversation themselves or soften their stance. The pause makes their resistance feel unfinished. Pausing during explanation prevents you from sounding defensive. People believe clarity comes from saying more. In reality, extended explanation signals that approval is being sought. When you keep talking, you frame yourself as needing acceptance of your reasoning. A pause breaks that frame and repositions you as the reference point. The listener shifts from judging your logic to monitoring your certainty. This is done by stopping mid-thought once the core point is delivered. In practice, this means you do not rush to close every gap or objection. Silence implies that the explanation was sufficient. This shows up when the other person nods, agrees, or changes topic without challenge. The pause quietly communicates that further justification is unnecessary. Pausing after agreement locks the outcome in place. Most people keep talking even after they get a yes. That reopens the decision and invites second thoughts. When you pause immediately after agreement, the brain treats the choice as complete. There is no new information to reassess or negotiate against. The moment settles and becomes harder to reverse. This is done by acknowledging the agreement and stopping all additional speech. In practice, this means you resist the urge to reinforce or celebrate verbally. Silence acts like a seal on the interaction. This shows up when the other person moves on without renegotiating details. The pause converts consent into commitment. Pausing while being challenged shifts the frame of authority. Most people respond quickly to defend their position. That reaction places them in a lower status role. A pause signals that the challenge is being evaluated, not accepted. It forces the other person to wait for your judgment. This delay reframes you as the one who decides what matters. This is done by remaining still and neutral when the challenge is made. In practice, this means no immediate rebuttal or emotional change. The silence introduces doubt about the strength of their challenge. This shows up when they start justifying why the challenge is reasonable. The pause turns their attack into a request for validation. Pausing before delivering a decision amplifies its weight. People expect decisions to follow immediately after discussion. When they do not, the delay signals that evaluation is happening at a higher level. The pause increases perceived cost because the outcome feels earned, not casual. This changes how seriously the decision is received. This is done by collecting input, stopping, and letting silence stretch before responding. In practice, this means you do not nod, agree, or comment while deciding. The other person starts replaying their own arguments in their head. They feel exposed to your judgment without feedback. This shows up when they add last-minute concessions or clarifications. The pause makes your final words land as final. Pausing after someone reveals information increases their vulnerability. People expect acknowledgement when they share something valuable. When it does not come immediately, the brain assumes the disclosure shifted the balance. The silence creates a sense that they may have given too much. That discomfort pushes them to explain, justify, or add more detail. Each addition deepens their exposure and weakens their position. This is done by receiving the information without visible reaction. In practice, this means no nodding, no reassurance, no verbal validation. You let the pause do the work of pressure. This shows up when they keep talking to correct a silence you created. The pause turns their disclosure into leverage. Pausing at the end of an interaction decides who mentally carries it forward. People assume conversations end when words stop. In reality, the last silence determines who keeps thinking about it. If you fill the ending with summary or reassurance, you release pressure. When you stop without closure, the other person continues the interaction alone. Their mind replays tone, timing, and implications without your input. This is done by ending cleanly once your position is clear and saying nothing else. In practice, this means no wrap-up, no softening, no final clarification. The silence forces them to sit with unresolved meaning. This shows up when they follow up later trying to clarify where they stand. They are still inside the pause.